Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive into the world of business?
Always. Especially when it involves a classic like Business Adventures by John Brooks. His storytelling is just brilliant.
Right. He has a knack for finding those human stories, those moments of drama that really bring these historical events to life. And we're going to cover quite a range today, from market crashes to tax loopholes, and even the rise and fall of a certain car that, well, let's just say it wasn't exactly a roaring success.
Oh, you mean the Edsel. Yeah, that's a story that every business student should know. It's a cautionary tale, really.
Exactly. But before we get into the Edsel fiasco, let's rewind the clock a bit back to May 28th, 1962. Picture this. You're an investor, and the market's taking a nosedive.
Not a good feeling.
But here's the kicker. The ticker tape, your only lifeline to real-time information, is running almost an hour and a half late. Talk about anxiety-inducing.
Wow, yeah. I can only imagine the panic. That
Oh,
feeling of
yeah.
being completely in the dark, not knowing how bad things really are. It really highlights how crucial, reliable information is, even today.
And to make matters worse, you might even get woken up in the middle of the night by a margin call. Suddenly, you're scrambling to cover your losses.
Oof, that's the nightmare scenario for any investor. Margin calls are serious business.
They are. And Brooks does a fantastic job explaining how they work, how leverage can amplify both gains and losses in the market.
Right. He makes these complex financial mechanics accessible to anyone, even if you don't have a Wall Street background.
Okay, so enough with the market crashes for now. Let's talk about that infamous car we mentioned earlier, the Ford Edsel.
Ah, the Edsel. A legendary flop. It's amazing how even a giant like Ford could miscalculate so badly.
I know. They poured millions into developing and marketing this car, only for it to become the poster child for product failure.
I think one of the key takeaways from the Edsel story is the importance of listening to your customers. Ford seemed more focused on their own vision than on what people actually wanted in a car.
Yeah, that's a good point. They had all these grand ideas, but did they do enough market research? Do they really understand their target audience?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's something that businesses still struggle with today. You can have the best product in the world, but if it doesn't resonate with consumers, it's doomed to fail.
Brooks paints this vivid picture of the Edsel's launch, the fanfare, the excitement, the executives basking in the supposed glory of their creation.
Hmm.
It's almost Shakespearean, the hubris before the fall.
Absolutely. And then, of course, there were the quality issues, oil leaks, faulty transmissions, you name it. The Edsel seemed to be plagued with problems from day one.
It's almost comical, the litany of blunders that Brooks describes. It makes you wonder how they didn't see it coming.
I know. It really underscores the importance of quality control, of making sure your product actually works as intended.
And Ford went all in on the Edsel. They built new factories, hired thousands of workers, and even pressured their existing dealers to stock the car. They had so much riding on its success.
And that's another lesson from the Edsel debacle, the danger of putting all your eggs in one basket. Diversification is key, even for a company as big as Ford.
Okay, ready for a change of pace? Let's talk taxes. Specifically, the income tax, that ever-present reality for most of us.
Ah, taxes. Can't live with them, can't live without them.
Brooks points out that in 1964, nearly 63 million individual income tax returns were filed, generating over $54.5 billion in revenue. And that's not even counting corporate taxes.
Wow, that's a staggering amount of money. It really highlights the scale and impact of the income tax on the economy.
It does. And this whole concept that Brooks introduces, the idea of before-tax money versus after-tax money, really makes you think.
It's like a hidden game we're all playing, constantly trying to figure out how much of our income we actually get to keep.
Exactly. And it raises questions about fairness, about whether the system is truly designed to benefit everyone or if it favors certain groups over others.
Right. Brooks is challenging us to think critically about the tax system, not just as individuals filing our returns, but as citizens who have a stake in how the system operates as a whole.
And speaking of navigating the system, that brings us to the fascinating world of tax loopholes.
Ah, yes. Those clever ways to legally reduce your tax burden.
Brooks acts as our guide, revealing some of the most eyebrow-raising strategies used by the wealthy to minimize their tax bills.
One of the most well-known, even back then, was the capital gains provision. It essentially allowed high earners to pay a lower tax rate on profits from investments compared to their regular income.
He tells this great story about David Susskind interviewing a group of multimillionaires. And guess what? Not a single one of them considered tax rates to be a problem. Why? Because they were all taking advantage of the capital gains loophole.
It's a great example of how the tax code can create a different set of rules for those with significant wealth and access to sophisticated financial advice.
And Brooks doesn't stop there. He digs into other loopholes, like corporate pension plans, tax-free foundations, and personal holding companies. It's a real eye-opener.
It makes you wonder if these loopholes are truly serving the greater good or if they're just exacerbating inequality. It's a question worth pondering.
And we're just getting started. Brooks takes us on a wild ride through insider trading, the Xerox revolution, and even the stock market's reaction to President Kennedy's assassination.
Each story is a window into a different facet of the business world, offering insights into human behavior, risk, and the often unpredictable nature of the market. Let's dive into some of those stories you mentioned. Insider trading, for instance. Brooks really takes us on a journey there, showing how the perception and rules around it have evolved over time.
Right. It's fascinating to see how what was once considered almost acceptable practice is now, well, very much illegal.
Exactly. Back in the day, profiting from insider information was almost seen as a shrewd business tactic. Brooks even tells the story of Nathan Rothschild, the famous financier.
Oh, yeah. He used his network and advanced knowledge of the Battle of Waterloo's outcome to make a killing on the London Stock Exchange.
It's a legendary tale. And then you have John Jacob Astor capitalizing on the Treaty of Ghent to amass a fortune. It highlights how norms and ethical standards can change drastically over time.
Definitely. What was once seen as clever maneuvering is now a serious offense.
Absolutely. And Brooks walks us through that shift. He talks about how the 1934 Securities Exchange Act and Rule 10b-5 tried to level the playing field.
Right. It was a major step towards curbing the rampant insider trading that had become, let's face it, a bit of a stain on Wall Street's reputation.
For sure. But as Brooks illustrates, it wasn't always easy to enforce. It took a landmark case like the Texas Gulf sulfur incident in 1966 for the SEC to really flex its muscles.
Oh, that's a great one. A real nail-biter. It had everything. A massive ore discovery, secret meetings, code names, executives scrambling for profits.
It reads like a financial thriller. Brooks does a fantastic job of unraveling the whole scheme step by step.
It all starts with this incredible ore discovery in Canada, right? Texas Gulf Sulfur tries to keep it under wraps, but of course word gets out. And who benefits?
The insiders. Executives, geologists, anyone with a whiff of the news. They're gobbling up shares, exercising stock options, all while trying to keep the public in the dark.
It's amazing how much effort they put into covering their tracks. Payphones, coded messages, you name it.
But the SEC was on their trail. Brooks details how investigators meticulously pieced together the puzzle, exposing the web of deceit.
And the outcome? A major victory for the SEC and a clear message to Wall Street. Insider trading is not a game.
Exactly. The Texas Gulf sulfur case was a turning point. It really solidified the SEC's role as the watchdog of the market.
It's a reminder that even in the world of high finance, there are consequences for breaking the rules.
Speaking of groundbreaking developments, let's move on to something a bit more, shall we say, innovative. The Xerox revolution.
Xerox, a company that truly changed the world. It's amazing to think how one man's invention could have such a profound impact.
It all started with Chester Carlton, right? A bit of an eccentric inventor with a vision for a dry copier.
It's almost hard to imagine now, but before Xerox, making copies was a tedious, messy affair. Carbon paper, mimeograph machines, .uf.
And as Brooks points out, people were pretty resistant to change. The idea of a dry copier seemed far-fetched, even impossible. But Carlson persevered, and eventually the technology caught up with his vision.
And what a success story it became. By 1966, Americans were churning out 14 billion xerographic copies a year. That's a staggering number.
Talk about a cultural phenomenon. Suddenly, everyone could copy anything, from documents to photographs to artwork.
It democratized access to information in a way that was truly revolutionary.
It also created a whole new class of investors, the Xerox millionaires, as Brooks calls them, those who got in early and rode the wave of the company's success.
It's a reminder that sometimes backing the right innovation can pay off big time.
Absolutely. But there's a flip side to every coin, right? Xerox's success also raised some complex questions about copyright infringement.
That's true. Did making copying so easy inadvertently fuel unauthorized reproduction? Did it undermine intellectual property rights?
It's a debate that's still relevant today, especially in the digital age. As technology advances, we're constantly grappling with the tension between access to information and the protection of creative works.
It's a tricky balance, for sure. And Brooks doesn't shy away from exploring that complexity. He talks about the challenges faced by libraries, educators, and publishers in this new landscape.
Right. He even brings in the perspective of Marshall McLuhan, the media theorist, who argued that we need to create anti-environments to counteract the effects of new technologies. It's a fascinating concept, and it makes you think about the unintended consequences of progress.
Definitely food for thought. Okay, let's shift gears again. From the world of high-tech innovation to one of the most shocking events in American history, the assassination of President Kennedy.
A somber day indeed. Brooks takes us right to the heart of the financial world, the New York Stock Exchange, as the news breaks.
It's chaos. Traders are scrambling, rumors are flying, and the ticker tape can't keep up.
Brooks paints a vivid picture of the emotional and financial turmoil. The Dow Jones plummets, losing billions of dollars in value in a matter of minutes.
Yeah, amidst this national tragedy, Brooks weaves in the story of Ira Hopton Company, a brokerage firm already teetering on the brink of collapse.
Their downfall is a reminder that even the most seasoned investors can make costly mistakes. In this case, they tried to corner the market on frozen food stocks.
Cornering the market. It sounds almost like a game, but as Brooks explains, it's a high-risk maneuver with the potential to destabilize the entire system.
And for Hopton Toe, their gamble backfired spectacularly. The market panic triggered by Kennedy's assassination only made things worse.
It's a stark reminder that the financial world is interconnected, and unexpected events can have ripple effects that reach far and wide.
But amidst the turmoil, Brooks also highlights a glimmer of hope. He talks about how Wall Street leaders stepped up to prevent a wider meltdown.
Right. These titans of finance, who are often portrayed as ruthless and self-serving, work tirelessly to restore order and confidence in the markets.
It's a reminder that even in times of crisis, there are people willing to put aside their own interests for the greater good.
It's a powerful message for sure. Okay, are you ready for a story that's a little less dramatic, but no less fascinating?
Always up for a good yarn. What do you have in mind?
How about a tale of corporate collusion, code names, and a price-fixing scheme that would make even the most cynical observer raise an eyebrow?
Sounds intriguing. Let's hear it.
Okay, so picture this. A group of executives from some of the biggest electrical equipment companies in the country are conspiring. But their goal isn't world domination. It's something far more mundane, yet just as impactful: rigging the prices of electrical equipment.
Now that's a twist. It's amazing how greed can manifest itself in the most unexpected ways.
Brooks takes us inside this conspiracy, revealing how these executives went to great lengths to keep their activities under wraps.
Code names, secret meetings, even falsified expense reports. They were operating like a shadow organization within their own companies.
It all came to light in 1961 during Senate hearings, led by Senator Estes Kefauver. And as Brooks details, the scandal implicated 29 companies, including industry giants like General Electric.
It's a story that raises a lot of questions about corporate culture, accountability, and the pressures that can lead even seemingly ethical individuals down a slippery slope.
Brooks delves into some of the internal communication breakdowns at GE, where orders to comply with the law were either ignored or misinterpreted. It makes you wonder how something so widespread could have gone unchecked for so long.
Right. It highlights the importance of transparency and clear communication within organizations. But Brooks doesn't just focus on the serious side of the story. He also throws in some amusing details, like the phase of the moon formula that these executives use to allocate bids among competitors.
Oh yeah. It's almost comical, but it also reveals a blatant disregard for fair competition and ethical business practices.
It's a reminder that sometimes, even in the corporate world, truth can be stranger than fiction.
All right, are you ready for another roller coaster ride through the world of stock manipulation?
Bring it on. I'm strapped in.
This time we're talking about the E.L. Bruce Company, a lumber and flooring manufacturer. Back in 1958, their stock price suddenly skyrocketed. Not because of any brilliant business strategy, but due to a completely accidental corner.
Wait, an accidental corner? How does that even happen?
Brooks explains it beautifully. Essentially, a group of investors unintentionally gained control of a significant portion of Bruce Company shares, leaving short sellers in a bind.
Oh, I see. Those who had bet on the stock price going down were suddenly scrambling to cover their positions, driving the price even higher.
Precisely. It's a perfect illustration of how unpredictable the market can be. Even seemingly random actions can have massive unintended consequences.
Absolutely. But then Brooks takes us back to the 1920s, to a far more deliberate attempt at cornering the market.
Ah, yes. Clarence Saunders and the Piggly Wiggly caper. Now that's a story for the ages.
Saunders, the founder of the Piggly Wiggly grocery chain, was a visionary entrepreneur, but he also had a stubborn streak, a belief that he could outsmart Wall Street.
And that belief led him down a perilous path. He decided to try and corner the market on Piggly Wiggly stock, convinced that he could squeeze out the short sellers and make a fortune.
It was a bold move, but as Brooks illustrates, it was also incredibly risky. He details the dramatic standoff between Saunders and the NYSE governing committee, the clash of personalities, the accusations of manipulation, and the looming threat of a market panic.
It's a classic David versus Goliath story, with Saunders as the audacious underdog taking on the establishment. But this time, David doesn't quite win.
Right. Brooks reveals how the NYSE ultimately intervened, potentially even bending their own rules, to prevent Saunders from completely cornering the market. It's a fascinating glimpse into the power dynamics of Wall Street and the lengths to which authorities will go to maintain stability.
And it raises some thought-provoking questions about the ethics of market manipulation, the role of speculation, and the fine line between shrewd investing and reckless gambling. But let's shift gears again from the high-stakes world of stock corners to a more nuanced story about a man who straddled the worlds of public service and private enterprise.
Ah, you must be talking about David Lilienthal. He's one of those figures whose career path really makes you think.
Exactly. Lilienthal went from leading government agencies like the Tennessee Valley Authority and the Atomic Energy Commission to becoming a Wall Street millionaire. It's quite a journey.
It is, and Brooks captures the complexities of that journey beautifully. He shows us Lilienthal grappling with the contrast between the idealism of public service and the pragmatism of the business world. He's this champion of public power, of using government resources to improve people's lives, and then he ends up working with big banks and corporations. It's almost like a complete 180.
Right. And Brooks doesn't shy away from that tension. He shares an anecdote about Lilienthal's time working on atomic energy policy during the Cold War.
Oh, I remember that one. Lilienthal was deeply troubled by the way military and scientific figures use the term targets when discussing nuclear strategy.
It really bothered him. Those targets were cities, populated by real people. It was a stark reminder of the human cost of these abstract policy decisions.
It shows a real sense of empathy, a recognition that numbers on a spreadsheet don't always capture the full weight of the consequences.
And then, out of the blue, he gets this offer to join a small mining company at the urging of Andre Meyer, a partner at the investment bank Lazard Frères.
Talk about a career shift. It seemed to come out of nowhere. A lot of people were scratching their heads wondering what Lilienthal was thinking.
I bet. It seemed like a betrayal to some, especially given his strong advocacy for public service.
And here's the irony. Lilienthal ends up becoming a millionaire, thanks to a stock option, a tax loophole that was often criticized by liberals.
Brooks even quotes from Lilienthal's personal journal, where he reflects on this decision. He talks about wanting to experience the world of business firsthand, to see if it could offer the same sense of fulfillment as public service.
It's a fascinating glimpse into his internal struggle. He's wrestling with these big questions. What constitutes a meaningful life? How do you balance personal ambition with a commitment to the greater good?
It's something we all grapple with, I think, finding that balance between our values and our aspirations.
Definitely. And Brooks doesn't offer any easy answers. He simply presents Lilienthal's story and lets us draw our own conclusions.
Speaking of fascinating characters, have you ever heard of Wilma Sauce and Louis Gilbert?
Oh, yeah. The shareholder activists. They were quite a pair, always stirring things up at those corporate meetings.
They were relentless, weren't they? Brooks uses the 1966 AT&T annual meeting as a prime example.
Sosk and Gilbert were like watchdogs, holding those executives accountable, demanding transparency and better treatment for small shareholders.
They weren't afraid to speak their minds, even if it meant ruffling some feathers.
One of my favorite anecdotes is when Sauce nominated a psychoanalyst to the AT&T board. Her reasoning: some of those executives could benefit from a little therapy.
Can you imagine the reaction? It was classic Sauce. She knew how to get attention.
And you know what? Sometimes that's what it takes to bring about change. Shake things up, make people uncomfortable, and force them to confront the issues.
It's interesting how Brooks contrasts the AT&T meeting with the Pfizer meeting that same year. John Gilbert, Lewis's brother, attended that one, and he was treated with a lot more respect.
Right. It goes to show that not all companies are created equal when it comes to shareholder engagement. Some are more open to dialogue than others.
But regardless of their approach, Sauce and Gilbert played an important role in raising awareness about shareholder rights. They helped pave the way for greater transparency and accountability in corporate governance.
They were pioneers, for sure. All right, are you ready for one last story? A tale of corporate espionage, spacesuits, and a legal battle that captured the nation's imagination.
Bring it on.
Okay, so back in the 1960s, the space race was in full swing, and companies were vying for lucrative government contracts.
It was a high-stakes game with billions of dollars on the line. And in this cutthroat environment, trade secrets were fiercely guarded.
And that's where our story begins. We have Donald Volgemuth, a talented scientist working for BF Goodrich, a leading developer of spacesuits.
But then a rival company, International Latex, comes along and offers Volgemuth a sweeter deal. A higher salary, stock options, the whole package.
It's the classic talent poaching scenario. But Goodrich wasn't about to let their star employee walk away with their valuable trade secrets.
Nope. They took Volgemuth to court, seeking an injunction to prevent him from spilling the beans to his new employer.
And this is where the story gets really interesting. Volgemuth shows up in court wearing a full spacesuit.
Can you picture that? It must have been quite a sight.
It was. And at one point during the proceedings, Volgemuth actually asks the judge if he can remove his helmet. It's like something out of a movie.
It's a reminder that even in the midst of serious legal battles, there's always room for a little bit of absurdity. But in the end, the court sided with Goodrich, barring Volgemuth from disclosing their confidential information.
It was a victory for Goodrich, but it also highlighted the challenges of protecting intellectual property in a competitive landscape.
And I think it underscores the importance of non-compete agreements and other legal mechanisms to safeguard trade secrets.
Absolutely. Okay, last but not least, we have a story that takes us to the heart of international finance, with a dash of Cold War tension thrown in for good measure.
It's November 1964, and the British pound is in trouble. Speculators are betting against it, and there are fears of a currency crisis that could ripple through the global economy.
And who steps in to save the day? The Federal Reserve, of course. Brooks takes us behind the scenes at the New York Fed, where Charles Coombs and Alfred Hayes are leading the rescue effort.
They're working around the clock, coordinating with central banks around the world, trying to shore up the pound and prevent a financial meltdown.
Brooks captures the urgency of the situation. Coombs and Hayes are fueled by coffee and sandwiches, poring over reports, making frantic phone calls, and navigating a complex web of international agreements.
And he throws in these little details that just bring the story to life, like the fact that the Federal Reserve limousine wasn't equipped with a phone.
I know, it's hilarious, but it also highlights the challenges of coordinating a global rescue effort in the pre-internet era.
They're literally scrambling to find payphones to make these crucial calls. It's a reminder that even the most sophisticated systems rely on human ingenuity and sometimes a bit of improvisation.
Absolutely. But in the end, the rescue package works. The pound stabilizes and a crisis is averted.
It's a testament to the power of collaboration and the crucial role that central banks play in maintaining global financial stability.
So there you have it. John Brooks's business adventures takes us on a whirlwind tour of the business world, from the heights of success to the depths of failure, from the boardroom to the courtroom, from Wall Street to the halls of government.
He shows us that business is about more than just numbers and spreadsheets. It's about people, their motivations, their decisions, and the consequences of those decisions, both intended and unintended.
He reminds us that the world of business is full of drama, intrigue, and even humor, and that the lessons we can learn from the past are as relevant today as they ever were.
So keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking questions. The world of business is full of fascinating stories just waiting to be discovered.